Hey, what's going on? Gonna do some car stuff today, and brand new to the channel, sort of, is my 91 Mazda Miata. I've had it since about 2014 or 15, but haven't needed to do a whole lot of work to it because it's pretty good, and I love it. It's mostly stock, but there's always some room for improvement, right? So I'm on a little mission to do sort of an OEM plus type of thing, where I'm not ruining the car and making it really harsh to drive around in, but just making it that little bit better so I can enhance my enjoyment of it. In this video, I'll be replacing my old worn out motor mounts with some brand new Mazda Competition mounts. They're about a 40% stiffer rubber, so they should help with throttle response a little bit, but without creating too much vibration and harshness. I'm doing this by myself in the driveway, so I pick up a lot of interesting tips and tricks that should help you save some time if you try this. In the end, I'll go for a test drive and give you my impressions for what these mounts feel like. Are they much harsher, or are they still pretty comfortable? Well, you'll have to stick around to find out. In order to do this project safely, you'll need at least 2 good jack stands and a good jack, as well as a couple blocks for the rear wheels if you're only jacking up the front. Okay, we're up in the air. We've got the front wheels off and the car is safely supported by jack stands. So that frees up the floor jack to support the engine. So what I'm gonna do is I have a block of wood to spread out the load, and I'm gonna jack it up from the oil pan. To start with, I'm just going to support it, make sure it's holding the weight of the engine before I undo these bolts that hold the motor mounts to the frame, and also loosen the motor mounts from the engine side. I'll try to get a better camera angle in here. It's not going to be easy. Driver's side is tough because there's more in the way. Passenger side should be a little easier. You can kind of see it from up top. And we can sort of get a view of it from in here as well. So I'll get the jack in place first to make sure the engine is supported before I start loosening anything. Let's go. Okay, we're not trying to actually lift up the car, we're just trying to take the weight of the engine, so that should be good for now. Now we can start loosening stuff. Shut up, airplane. I'm trying to narrate. Dang, every time. So I figure we might as well start with the easy side and learn how to do it before we do the more difficult side. So this is the passenger side. But let's see how this goes. A little bit of PB blaster is probably not a bad idea. Just a little. I found that all of the bolts took some effort to break loose, and since I don't have a breaker bar, I used my torque wrench. On these ones, I needed to use a couple of extensions to get to them. It's a bit awkward, but it does work. Oh! Definitely loose, but I can't take it out, so I am gonna have to jack the engine up, which means I'm gonna have to at least take the lower bolt out of the other side. So let's do that. There we go. Okay, now I should be able to jack the engine up. Hey, it's me from the future. I'm gonna save us both some time and tell you that before you jack the engine up, you're gonna need to make some clearance. So here's what you got to do. You're going to have to detach the coil bracket from the engine. It's got 2 bolts up top and 1 hidden one in the back. You can leave the plug wires plugged in and just flop it forward out of the way. And then you're also going to need to unplug the cam sensor right here. This will definitely want to hit. So unplug that and get the wire out of the way. And lastly, I also found it helpful to unbolt this vacuum hardline from the firewall. It's just 2 bolts. And then undo this one hose and swing it out of the way. That way we have more room in the back so the engine can go up and down more easily. You won't see that stuff loose in the next couple shots because I hadn't figured that out yet, but eventually I will figure that out, and it's necessary. So just get that out of the way. Hey, do you mind? Crows. Also, as a heads up, when it comes time to do the driver's side mount, it's going to make life a lot easier to remove the air box as well as the heat shield on the exhaust. That'll actually give us some access on this side to get in there, and I found it is possible to get this mount in and out from the top once those things are out. So definitely worthwhile to remove. So I'm going to give this a couple of little pumps and see. Oh yeah, it's going. Sounds are happening. Maybe we can get this one out now. Oh, look at that. You can just grab that and take it out. Okay. Maybe I need to take this liner off, huh? I don't know why I didn't do this before, but I'm going to go ahead and take off the under tray here. It's just got several of these 10mm bolts holding it in, so it should be pretty quick and give us more access. There goes that motor mount. Okay, cool. So I had enough wiggle room when I jacked the engine up enough to where this lower stud could clear the hole, and I was able to shimmy my hand in there and kind of get it out from this cavity, especially once I remove the under tray. I know the other side's not going to be as easy, but let's take a look at this and replace the mount. Yeah, it's not that bad actually. You'll definitely need to clamp the mount in a vise in order to get this nut off. It's pretty tight. There's a little comparison between the old one and the new one. Looks like the old one is just a little bit collapsed. Not that bad. It does look like at the very bottom there's a crack starting to form, but I think these were probably still fine, which is kind of what I suspected. There's this little notch on the bottom so you can't put them in the wrong way. And these tabs up top. So should be pretty straightforward. We'll put those brackets back together with this and put this back in. Okay, here's the new mount installed onto this bracket. Make sure to torque this nut. It's between, I think it was 42 and 58 foot-pounds, so I did it to 50. And this goes back in the car like this, right? So this plate that goes over it has these, I believe those are probably water drain holes, so that you want them to go to the bottom. And remember, this yellow paint mark, if you still have it there, is what you see from the outside, like this. So just pop this back on. Bada bing, bada boom, and this can go back in. These bolts also have a torque spec, which is a bit less. Remember on this passenger side that the bracket needs to slip behind the starter bracket, and also these 3 bolts are different lengths, so hopefully you remember which ones go where. Also, a big time-saving tip is to only put the rearmost bolt in first, loosely, because we'll need to be able to pivot these things back and forth in order to line them back up with the frame. You'll do the same thing on the driver's side, and this is going to save you a lot of time and struggle. Ask how I know. So in hopes of making things a little easier for myself on this side, last night off camera I went ahead and took off the airbox as well as the heat shield for the exhaust. Now I can actually see that mount down there. Also took off this vacuum hard line for the brake booster, which was on the firewall to give myself more clearance, and completely detached this guy so he can flop over to the side if we want and get him out of the way. Definitely helps to have more wiggle room, but this is going to be annoying, probably, just because of the tight space. And also, as you can see, it's not lined up anymore. So hopefully I'll be able to get it lined back up in the end. We'll find out. So I'm having a heck of a time with that third bolt that's next to the exhaust manifold. It's just really hard to get any tool on it. I think maybe if I come from underneath, this might be my best bet. So I'm gonna try the double wrench technique, see if I can get on that and at least break it loose. In case you don't know, the double wrench technique is where you take your main wrench and hook a second similarly sized wrench into it in such a way that you can get extra leverage. Very handy to know. Oh, I think it moved. Did it move? Yes, it did move. This is gonna be horrible to go back in. Oh, you just gotta jam your entire hand in there. That's fine. There it goes. Okay. Okay, now it's loose, so the only question is how to actually get it out of there. I'm glad I took out the air box because maybe that gives me a fighting chance at getting it out from the top. Yeah, this comes right off. So I'll get that out of the way. And hopefully we can finagle the rest of it. Aha, it is possible. You just see which way I turned it around to do that? Hopefully, because I'm not going to do it again. But you have to have the skinnier side pointed up, and then you can work it up and around. Ha! Oh wow, look at that. This one is cracked pretty badly. So that sort of justifies the whole thing. Oh yeah. Yeah, actually both sides are cracked really badly. This wasn't too far off from ripping in half. Oh yeah. Just like on the other side, I found it necessary to clamp this in my vise and use a torque wrench or breaker bar if you have it to break this nut loose. There's the old one, all cracked and gnarly, and the beautiful new Competition mount. You can tell it's the Competition one because it has this white raised stripe on it. Just like the other side, I torqued this nut to 50 foot-pounds. Okay, so I'm going to try to do the reverse of how I got the old one out. So skinny side facing down, go sideways. Get the bracket under the exhaust. Get past that bracket. Well, that was a terrible camera angle, so here's a slowed down and reversed clip of when I removed it that shows you pretty clearly what you need to do to get it back in. And there we go. We're in the cavity. So now we can rotate it however we need to. Remember that the drainage holes go towards the bottom of the car. So it'll be like this. And it just snaps on with these two snaps on the mount. Oh. That snapped on. Now I just have to position this. So just like on the passenger side, you'll just want to start this rearmost bolt first. Since this one's so hard to get to, it might not be a bad idea to thread in one or two of the front ones just to hold it in position while you get this one going, and then remove the front ones entirely. It has to be this way so you have enough wiggle room to line up the lower studs with the cross member. You'll see in a second. Okay, status report. I think I know what I have to do. So I unbolted the two easier bolts over here and left the really difficult one threaded in but loose. And that gives me enough wiggle room here where I can go down below, line up the stud with its hole, while simultaneously gently lowering the engine so that stud will slot into this hole. Then I can loosely put on that nut and hopefully go do the same thing on the other side. Definitely tricky with one person, but it looks like I can reach the jack handle so I can see the stud right now. Oh, it lined up. Nice. That worked actually really well. Can you see it? It's there. Just going to barely thread this nut back on, just so it's not gonna slip out of here. That should be fine. And I'll try the other side. Okay, I've got the same thing going on the passenger side now. The front two bolts are out entirely and the back one is just barely loosely in. Also, the engine needs to be jacked up high enough so these studs aren't like really hard up against the frame. So I have some wiggle room. That's still not quite lining up, but I think if I get in here with a pry bar, maybe I'll be able to just push that in. Yeah, I got it. Now I should be able to lower the engine a little bit and do the same thing, thread on that nut. At this point, you can gently take the pressure off the jack and lower the engine down. Hopefully you can keep an eye on these holes while it's lowering so they can line up. You might need to raise it up a little bit again and adjust until the holes are nice and straight so you can thread in the bolts. Tell you what though, before I actually tighten these, I'm going to leave them loose and make sure I can get the other bolts on the driver's side started before I tighten anything. Alright, over here on the driver's side, it looks like I do have to jack up the engine a tiny bit to get those to line up. Ooh, that looks pretty good. Yeah, it really helps if you can get a visual straight on. Let's see if I can get these threaded in. Oh, like butter. Okay. Now that all the bracket to engine bolts are threaded in, we can torque them to 35 foot-pounds. Unsurprisingly, it's a bit hard to get access with a torque wrench, so you have to get a bit creative with extensions. You do lose some accuracy this way, but it's the only way to do it, and you still get pretty close. The only bolt that I wasn't able to get a proper torque reading on is that back one on the driver's side, where I just used double wrenches again and tightened it until it felt as tight as the other ones. Once both sides were torqued, I could lower the engine down, let the weight rest on the cross member, and torque those two bottom nuts to 50 foot-pounds. Okay, I'm pleased to report that both sides are fully bolted in and torqued. So now all that's left is to put back on all the things that I took off or out of the way. And aside from that, we should be ready to lower back on the ground and go for a spin. Okay, let's fire it up, see if it's any different. Oh, okay. I can actually feel the engine now, but it's not bad. It's not very much, but there is a little bit of seat of the pants feeling, which is kind of nice. Sports car like. Let's get out on the road. Feels pretty good. It's not a huge difference, but it's a little bit more direct, which is nice. And I'm kind of glad it's not a huge difference because there hasn't been a whole big increase in the harshness. So I think it's pretty good. Okay, let's go into a little bit more fun area here. is it a huge game changer? Not really. If your mounts are still in perfectly fine shape, then I'd say don't bother. But if you need new motor mounts anyway, these are a good upgrade. It's kind of a subtle upgrade, but I like that. It's not overly harsh, but I can tell the engine is a little bit more responsive and it feels a little more firmly planted within the frame of the car. So I think it's a really good trade-off and a good subtle upgrade for that OEM Plus thing that I was going for. So overall, pretty happy with the job. Well, mission accomplished. I'm pretty happy with these Mazda Competition mounts. I think they're a nice subtle upgrade over the stock ones without ruining the ride quality of the car. So happy with the result. I would say if you don't need to replace your motor mounts, it's probably not a big enough upgrade to justify it. But if you have old worn out original mounts, it's definitely a worthwhile upgrade. If you're doing racing or anything more intensive, you probably would want to go for some harder polyurethane mounts. But if you're like me and you're daily driving on the street, these are perfect. It is doable, as you can see, to do it yourself in the driveway. It just depends if you have the skill level and the experience. It does take a bit of finesse and definitely need to be mindful of your safety while you're doing something like this, because you have the car up in the air, you have the engine loose, there's jacking things up and down, so it's a little questionable. But if you have someone to help you, or if you're experienced enough, it is doable. And hopefully you learned some good tips and tricks, things to avoid, techniques that kind of helped that I figured out when doing this, maybe save you a little bit of time. So thanks for watching, and there's going to be more upgrades coming on this car soon, so stay tuned, click all the buttons, and I'll see you next time.